Please welcome Sean Shaw. Mr. Sean Shaw, hi, how are you?
I'm great, how are you doing?
Good, good. So first of all, just tell me about your organization, People Over Profits.
Sure, in Florida, I have a reputation of being a consumer advocate. I was the consumer advocate for insurance here in Florida. I'm a trial lawyer. I'm someone that believes that the power of corporations is way out of whack. And so I started an organization to kind of talk about that and to bring some of those issues to light. And whether it's legislative battles, whether it is ballot initiatives, whether it's just bringing some of these issues to light, I thought that the conversation just needed a little meat on the other side on behalf of the little person fighting against the big corporation. That's what I've kind of done all my career and just wanted to keep it going.
That is super important. You are in Florida, of course, and you have a newish governor, Ron DeSantis, who we know in 2018 narrowly defeated Andrew Gillum, his Democratic opponent. Since he's been elected, Ron DeSantis has been busy making Florida great again, or swampier, I'm sure, than it usually is. But specifically, I want to talk about his signature of Amendment 4, right? Which was that ballot measure that Florida voters passed that would give former felons the right to vote finally, and which I don't think they've had for 150 years, it seems. And he signed that amendment, but with a caveat. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I ran for Attorney General here in 2018. I was the Democratic nominee, and one of the reasons I ran is because here in Florida, the people pass ballot initiatives, and then the conservative legislature, when they don't like them, they kind of pass laws to thwart the ballot initiatives. And this is another example. 67% of the people in Florida said that after you serve your time of sentence, that you should get your right to vote restored. The legislature then said, well, not really. Now you've got to pay all your court costs, all your fines. Anything associated with your sentence has to be fully vetted and laid out before you can vote. That is not the intention behind the amendment, but that is the law that the legislature passed after that amendment was passed, because you can guess the legislature's Republican, you can guess who they think is about to get their rights restored and how they're going to vote. And so the legislature did that, and the governor, of course, said all the right things, that he believes in the people, but of course, his own administration, he put his lawyers to fight against Amendment 4. And it's just, it's very disappointing. This is Florida, welcome to Florida. And, a lot of people were trying to give Governor DeSantis credit for being somewhat of he was doing better than they thought. But listen, we went from Rick Scott, who was about as bad as you could get, till about slightly better Governor DeSantis. Okay, he's a little bit better than Rick Scott. That doesn't mean he's good. It means he's just better than Rick Scott.
Yeah, it's like one of your downgraded hurricanes.
Yeah, he's not that much better. And the Amendment 4 fiasco is an example of that.
Yeah, well, explain that a little bit more in terms of, what are felons when they get out, or those who've served their time, right? What kind of fees do they have? How much are they looking at?
Well, those fees can be extensive. If you've got to pay restitution in a case, those fees can be thousands and thousands of dollars. And if you've been in jail, where do you have that money? Where are you going to get that money? And that money shouldn't prevent you from voting, right? You get out of jail, you've paid your dues, you've spent your time, you ought to be able to vote.
Right.
And so a lot of us call those monies being required to be paid before you vote a poll tax.
Right.
And we know exactly what we're evoking. I know exactly what that term means in the context of race in this country, and it's exactly the term we meant to use. That is exactly what we believe it is. So if you're a felon, there's some other areas around the state where certain state attorneys have worked with judges so that there's a way that judges can waive some of these fees, can turn some of them into community service and do some of these things. But on a statewide level, there's still a lot of questions as to how this is going to work, and there shouldn't be. The people of Florida, 67%, passed a constitutional amendment saying that when you serve your time, you're a returning citizen, you ought to automatically get your rights restored. And this fiasco is not what the people intended, but the legislature does it a lot when they don't like stuff.
Right, and by poll tax, you are invoking Jim Crow laws.
I know exactly what I'm invoking, and I mean to do it, and I said what I said.
Yeah, no, and obviously it disproportionately and primarily affects Black Floridians. And I mean, obviously, like, it makes you feel like, you're not wanted. It's hard enough right now to get people to come out to the polls, right? But then imagining someone who's trying to get on their feet after serving time, trying to find work, trying to overcome all the stigma that is someone who's been formerly incarcerated. Voting is not necessarily enough for everyone, but not on the top of your list, right?
Right.
So it's just incredible.
I've knocked on some of these doors, and when you knock on the door of a returning citizen and you ask them, I'd like to have your vote. I'm Sean Shaw, I'm running for XYZ. And those people look into your eyes and say, I can't vote. I am a convicted felon. That person is crestfallen. Yeah. And for us to take them through the emotional highs and lows now of all the work, there were tons of blood, sweat, and tears that went into passing this amendment. And to pass it and to have the jubilation associated with it, to see the legislature then take it away, and to see now the chaos involved is just indicative of Florida. Welcome to Florida.
I just want to say it is interesting to see that one of the most direct forms of democracy, this ballot measure, it's not just Florida. I've been in Utah, they overturned their Medicaid expansion there, but the state legislature did it because the state legislature is Republican. It's incredible that it actually ends up being way more complicated to overturn and amend and change this measure that is very, very explicit and clear. And that they go through hoops because, they're trying to prevent people of color from getting to the polls primarily, of course, and exactly. Maybe Democratic voters, right? But there's another thing that he proposed. We're talking about your governor, Ron DeSantis, right now. I'm with Sean Shaw. He's a former Florida state rep. And so DeSantis is proposing a huge salary increase for Florida teachers, which on its face seems incredibly progressive. Like it seems something a Democrat would be in favor of. Can you tell me more about that and sort of what your read on this is?
Well, listen, I actually served in the legislature, so I can tell you, you never believe what people say behind podiums. You believe in what the bill actually says. And I haven't read it back to front, but I'm gonna be very interested in a year or two from now as to how much base salary increase this bill is.
Right.
Because I've heard a few different phrases about the school board will have some abilities to implement these raises, that the raises are gonna go to base salary, that the raises are gonna not go to veteran teachers, they're only going to new teachers. So, again, DeSantis is good at one thing, saying the right thing on headlines. He believes in the environment and he believes in public education and he believes in Amendment 4. But when you look behind the curtain, actually he doesn't believe in the implementation of Amendment 4. Actually, DeSantis is continuing the dismantling of the public school system here in Florida by the expansion of vouchers and charters and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you look behind the nice podium speeches, you see that they're continuing to do in Florida what they've always done, which is try to turn our public school system into a for-profit institution, to have our environment not be what it ought to be, and to just have us be the least taxed state in the country, which means that we don't have money to do anything else. And that's what we're continuing to do. And I was in the legislature, so I know what speeches versus bills are, particularly in that legislative body.
Absolutely, I think it's really interesting that it's seen as almost this handout, like, okay, we're gonna raise base teacher salary, and then I don't wanna hear anything more from you.
Right.
It seems like he's not working with teachers unions who are upset about this.
Well, we have bills being proposed now to do away with teacher unions, to do away with unions, to make it such that you have to pay your dues every year, that they can't be automatically taken out of your paycheck. They're doing everything they can to attack unions because the only thing really standing up for public education in the state are teachers union. So the legislature is diabolical and very good, unfortunately, at going after what they don't like. And back to our other example, there's now proposals in the legislature to make it harder for the citizens to pass constitutional amendments.
Right.
So that in the future, we won't even have this Amendment 4 problem, because now it'll be damn near impossible for anyone to get a ballot onto a ballot initiative pass. So the legislature is doing what the legislature does.
It's so bald-faced, it's ridiculous. All right, well, switching gears a little bit. I know you have sort of a surprising candidate that you endorse in 2020. It seems like you're for a lot of progressive causes, and yet you endorse Mayor Pete Buttigieg for president, and he doesn't necessarily identify as a progressive. Why are you supporting Mayor Pete?
I will tell you, look, I'm going to be very candid with you. The term progressive changes. Depends on who you're talking to and what you're talking about.
Sure.
But I was drawn to Mayor Pete. I saw him on the Fox Town Hall. I had no connection to him, and he spoke to me. Sometimes someone just speaks to you. And I liked the optimism, I liked the pragmatism, and I just liked what I heard, and I got to know him, and I got to know his campaign better, and I liked it. I liked, candidly, the way he made me feel about the country in a positive way. When you juxtapose how negative I feel about the country now as I watch the impeachment play behind this interview. Trump makes me feel terrible. Pete makes me feel good about the future. He was the one that made me feel best. And I just kind of went with my heart. I went with the person that made me feel the best. I'm going to Iowa Friday. I'm going to be there through Tuesday, through the caucuses, and put in some work. This thin Florida blood is going to go up there. So that'll tell you how much I care about it. But we have a lot of good candidates, and our candidates have a lot of different strengths. And I just hope that when the time comes, we all understand who the enemy is, and it's the person that has been impeached in the White House. It's not other Democrats.
Absolutely. Well, we can definitely agree on that. Thank you, Sean Shaw, and please check out your work. For folks to check out your work, People Over Profits. And thanks so much.
No,
good luck in Iowa.
Thank you. It'll be cold, but thank you.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.